Huge thanks to our sponsors for making ResolveCon 24 possible. Motion VFX makes the best plugins for DaVinci Resolve. They have plugins to quickly add beautiful graphics to any kind of project you're working on, and they're compatible with both Mac and Windows. And right now you can get their mHello 3D for free. This is a pack of super useful 3D shapes that you can add to any video and take your visuals up a notch. Just click right here or the link in the description. And of course, ResolveCon would not be possible without Blackmagic Design. They just came out with the full release of DaVinci Resolve 19. For editing, color, effects, and audio, it's pretty much everything you need to make any kind of project in DaVinci Resolve. You can download DaVinci Resolve 19 right here or in the link in the description.
I'm Gedaly Guberek. I am a DaVinci Resolve trainer. I'm an indie filmmaker. I'm a teacher. I teach at dvresolve.com for AFI Film School, some of Blackmagic Design's online free workshops. So I'm pretty excited to share some of this stuff. Like I said, I'm a Star Wars nerd. The reason I wanted to do lightsabers here is I know a lot of you are new to Fusion, and I feel like this is a good gateway into VFX. There's a lot of principles of VFX compositing and using Fusion that I think are well illustrated by making lightsabers. So even if you don't like Star Wars, not too much judgment, you will still get something out of this. I know I saw some people in the chat saying that they have a love-hate relationship with Fusion or have been learning for a long time or still confused. I will try to keep this as beginner-friendly as possible, as well as throw in as many tips and workflows and the way that I work to give you some ideas. Quick note on how to learn this stuff, especially for those of you that are newer to Fusion. Don't feel the need to memorize everything. There are 300 nodes in Fusion, and if you start going in and saying, well, I need to understand what everything does all the time, you're going to have a hard time with it. With VFX, like other things, but especially for complex operations like this, you want to understand the principles. So I'm going to do my best to guide you through what are those techniques that you understand first, more so than what is the exact node and the exact switch or the exact slider. Because there are many different ways to accomplish similar tasks in Fusion. All right. Like I said, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. This is me with a lightsaber in a short film that I did a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's pretty fun. I'm going to do another one because I like lightsabers. So as we learn lightsabers here today in DaVinci Resolve, you can follow along. There is some media that you can download and follow along with me on. You don't need to follow along. If you are totally new to Fusion, I think it's going to be better for you to just watch and learn and let things soak in and then review later. Here's what we're going to do. So that is a little clip, and we're going to put this lightsaber effect on there. And there we go. So let's dive in and work through this. Everybody ready? If you're scared, I see some people in the chat. It's okay. Here we go. All right. So first step, I've got my clip. I just dragged this into my timeline here, and this you'll notice that there is no lightsaber here. This is just a stick, a prop. I do not have a real lightsaber. This is VFX, just for those of you who were not clear. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what exactly we need to do, and then we can do it. So first step, you'll notice it's looking log. It's kind of washed out. This was shot on an iPhone with Apple Log. I'm working in a color managed project. Cullen is doing a in-depth VIP session on that this weekend, so I don't think we have time to cover it too much, but I'm going to go to my project settings by hitting Shift 9, and I can go to color management, and you can see this is a color managed project, and I'm processing in automatic color management is turned off. I'm in DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and my output is the default Rec 709 scene. The reason I'm doing this is that in version 19, that will automatically color manage my clip into linear gamma, which is where compositing tends to happen. I'll explain that more as we go, but just know that if you are following along, I've got a color managed project that's in here, and then nothing has happened because I need to right click on this and assign an input color space. So this is Apple log. Bam, that looks more correct. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go into Fusion. I can either click on it, hit the Fusion tab at the bottom. I tend to work a lot with keyboard shortcuts, so I'm going to make sure my playhead is over this clip, and I hit Shift and the number 5. Ta-da, I'm in Fusion. And here we go. So nothing is showing up right now. If you are new to Fusion, the reason is there's nothing in my viewers. So if I click this button to see 2 viewers, I'm going to hit the tilde key to zero everything out in the viewers. I can click on my media in node, hit 1 on the keyboard, and now I have my clip in viewer number 1. I think most of the time we're just going to be looking at one viewer, so I'm going to come up to the upper right of viewer number 1, click on this rectangle, and now I see that there. I mentioned before that this is color managed. When I have this color managed project, this is new in version 19 for color management in Fusion. What is actually happening under the hood, if I turn off this default viewer LUT that is happening, I'm seeing my clip in linear space. That allows the light the light values that are being processed in Fusion to work the way that they do in the real world. So a doubling of values is a doubling of light. That's an extra stop of light. Short description of this is that that's how most VFX compositors work, because you can get things done in the way that you expect it to. Light behaves the way that it would in camera. And with lightsabers, it is a light effect, so I want to be working that way. It's a lot of setup. I'm just going to turn that LUT back on. We don't need to worry about the rest too much. Except that if you are working in a color managed project, you may notice if I flip back to the edit page, this actually looks different than it does on here. The reason I realized is that if you the color management doesn't have a final output. This is a detail, so feel free to ignore if you're totally new to this. But for those advanced users, if I click edit on the viewer LUT here and I go into the manage color space that's happening here and apply forward OOTF, now this matches what I see on the edit page. All right, hope you're still with me. Let's break this down a little bit more into the basics of what we need to do. As we're looking at any VFX shot, first step is not to just jump in and start doing things, but actually start to analyze the shot and figure out what needs to be done. So what is a lightsaber? It's really just a bright light source that is being blown out because it's so bright. If you filmed a light bulb or like an LED tube, and it's super bright, the exposure isn't for the light itself, it's for your subject, you're going to see generally a bright white core and a glow around it. That's really what a lightsaber is. So we're going to want to create that core, add a glow to it, and then we need to make sure that it goes over the lightsaber. We can also see that the lightsaber is going behind this Sith Lord here. That's me, by the way, just in case anyone didn't know. Look at those angry eyes. All right, anyway. So we need to make sure that we mask out the effect we do so that the saber core can go behind. And that's basically how we're going to go through this. All right. First thing I want to do, we'll just start here. I'm going to start with, I'm going to pick a frame 45. In order to start, a good place is to define what our core will be, which is going to be a white core. I'm going to hit Shift Space to bring my color picker, my tool picker, and I'm going to type BG for background. Hit Add, and that adds a background here. Nothing has happened yet because we're not viewing it. That's okay. I'm going to click on the color drop down here, and I can just drag this to white. nothing is happening. I'm not viewing it. If I click on background and hit 1 on the keyboard, you can now see I'm looking at my white background. But I don't need to see that right now. I'm going to click on media in 1 again, hit 1 on my keyboard, so I'm seeing that in the viewer. The next thing we're going to do in order to create our core is a polygon. This is a shape that we can draw. And there's a polygon tool right here in our toolbar. I can click and drag, or the way I work, I hit Shift Space, I type in PLY or polygon, and there it is. Hit Enter. There we go. And I'm going to start drawing this shape. I'm using my 3-button mouse to move around in the viewer, and then I can hit Command on a Mac or Control on Windows, and then I'm going to click a point down here. I'm going to zoom out, click a point up here, click another point up here, click another point down here, and close the shape right there. That's not exact just yet. I'll refine as we go. But that is me drawing a shape for the lightsaber. Now, for those of you who are a little bit experienced with Fusion or some effects, you may be wondering, why are we rotoscoping this anyway? Can't we just track this? Can we grab a tool? Can we do a luma key to get that white? Why this method? And the reason is that rotoscoping is necessary some of the time. And a lot of VFX artists do everything they know to avoid it, but ultimately it becomes necessary. And a lot of the ways to avoid rotoscoping still involve roto. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, rotoscoping is just the idea of drawing an outline around any object. It's a term that comes from like single cell, animation in the film days. We still use that. I'm going to call it roto. That basically just means drawing a shape on my screen. So, and the other thing answered, I guess, to my own question there is we can use other methods. So we could track some of this some of the time. We could pull a luma key to try to isolate those methods. This is actually a shot where that won't work some of the time, because if we're looking at this, as we start to get heavy motion blur here, any tracking I do, any luma key I do is not going to function super well. It may function for the second half of the shot, but not the first half of the shot where most of the motion is. So I'd like to show this method because you're going to need to use it at some point for something. I think it's good to know how to do, and I will share as many tips as I can in this time to make it friendlier to do. All right, so I've got my polygon here. Let's refine this just so this this shape is a little bit better. A couple tips to know. As you're selecting points, one thing I can do is hit Shift A on my keyboard to select all points. And then I can also drag the whole thing just by clicking Alt anywhere. Usually click inside the shape, and that moves the whole thing. So I can get it a little closer to where I want. The other thing is, if I click elsewhere to unselect all points and I click Alt or Option on a Mac, anywhere, so I'm hitting Alt or Option and click, it will automatically grab the nearest point. So if you're worried about, oh, I need to go in there and zoom all the way in and grab that point exactly, no, you don't need to do that. You can just hit Alt or Option, click, automatically grabs the nearest point, and click away to unselect that, Alt and click, and grab the next point. And now I have these lined up pretty much exactly where I want them. And because there's a curve here, and this is my sort of hero frame, I'm going to grab my handles here to add this Bezier curve to my shape. So I'm just clicking on each point, and I grab the end handle, bring it down, and there's my Bezier curve, which is, of course, named after the French engineer Pierre Bezier. That is true, by the way. All right, already we've got a shape. Let me connect this polygon to the blue, that is the mask input of background. And if I click on background and hit number 1 on my keyboard, you can now see, ta-da, I have a shape, I have a lightsaber. Pretty cool. There's so much more to do. Speaking of connecting things, I want to give you guys a quick tip here to make that easier. If you are, I'm zooming in on my node area with my middle mouse scroll wheel to make this bigger for you. If you're working, especially on a big composition, clicking and dragging, it's a lot. You're going to be doing that a lot. So I think any way you can make that easier on yourself, either by scrolling in to make the nodes bigger, that is one way to help. The other thing that I like to do is if you're in the menu, Fusion settings, and here we go, flow, and then there's this pipe grab distance, right? Yeah. And link grab distance. And this preference is to say how many pixels away do I need to be in order to grab that output or to grab the pipe. And I just like to drag that all the way up, click save, and now, bam, I just click here. I wasn't even near that point. Look at that. Hit that and drag it, and now I've got my my connection there. So that helps me work. It may help you. All right, so I've got my polygon here. Oops. And my viewer stopped working. Why did that happen? Let's try going back here. All right. There we go. So I've got a polygon, I've got background. What else? I need a glow. I'm going to connect that background to the media in with a merge. The shortcut I use to do that, let me do that again, is I grab the output of the background, put it over the media in output, and that automatically creates a merge. It puts my polygon and background on top, and there I have a white core. Next, we're going to want to make this move. So if I start going forward, and I'm going frame forward with a right bracket, you can see that there's no animation on my polygon currently. And if I go this way, then definitely nothing is happening. If I go back to frame 45, where I did this, we can start animating this polygon. Now, it's not going to be super interesting to do all this manually, but I do want to show you a few tips that can make your roto faster. So I like to roto by keeping my media selected in my viewer and having the polygon selected. So I'm not viewing the core itself. I'm just viewing the outline of my shape. That way I can be much more accurate with what I'm selecting, and I can just see the outline and the footage. Now, I don't want to go frame by frame for the whole thing because some places move more than others. So if I go from here to the end, there's not a whole lot of movement. Whereas if I go to the beginning, you can see there is a lot of movement. Usually the best way to rotoscope something is to go between, to do a first frame and a last frame and then start bisecting that. So go to the middle frame and then go to the middle of those frames. But rather than doing an arbitrary number of frames, I like to sort of bisect a movement. So from frame 45 to frame 99 at the end, there's not a lot of movement. So I can actually just go to the very end here and move my polygon. I'm going to move my polygon by selecting all points, hitting Shift A, all points. Now I'm going to hit Alt or Option to click and drag and get this sort of where I want. And now I'm going to hit T on my keyboard, click and drag, and that twists this polygon around the point I have selected. So I can just twist that right there. That's pretty close. And I can zoom in more and really place these where I want with Option or Alt. So just click and unselect all point, then Option, click, and it selects the closest point, and I drag that to where I want. Now, Fusion is interpolating between these frames. So from here to the end, it's going from one to the other. Obviously, it doesn't track the movement exactly, but it saves us from having to go frame by frame entirely, and that way we can just do the midpoint between that and the midpoint between that. You can also go every 2 frames, every 5 frames, every 10 frames, and start to get things to go where you want. Here's one way to accomplish that. I can right-click on the play button over here in Fusion, and you can see this little menu comes up that shows how many frames it's going to skip while you're playing or going frame by frame. So if I hit 5 on, let's do 10. I'm going to hit 10, and I'm going to hit next frame with right bracket. It goes 10 frames forward. Now I can select all my points, T for twist, and I've placed this at a keyframe. I'm going to go a frame forward again with that key, but it's moving 10 frames forward. You see we were on frame 45, then 55, and now we're on frame 65. Again, select all points. I'm going to Alt and drag. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. T for twist. And just repeat that process until I get what I want. Obviously, I can do that for everything. But I'm going to leave that for now. Now I'm going to right-click on the play button again, go back to 1, and I can go through frame by frame now and see, now that I have a keyframe every 10 frames, Resolve has interpolated between those frames there, and between those frames there, and so on. So that saves me time of having to go frame by frame, and now I can just see, okay, where can I be more detailed and add another point so that it interpolates between them. So that is a way to save time while rotoscoping. Now, if we look again at the beginning of the shot, this is going to be a lot of movement, so it's probably better that I do a lot more keyframes. So for this one, I would probably right-click on play. I would do 2, just so I'm doing every other frame, because as we start to get further, there are a lot of moves. So I might go here and just start moving. I'm going to move faster now, just so you can see how I might work through this. And I'm hitting left bracket to move this around, and T for twist. And continuing to work through. And then, of course, keep going, do that same thing. And as I start to get to these sorts of things, I'm going to actually just match the shape of my motion blur here. This is one reason I like doing a square or a 4-point polygon on this, is because I can actually just go around the entire motion blur that already exists in the frame. If you are doing a shot with not a lot of movement, like it stays very still, you can do 2 points and just add some width to that line. But if you do have any decent amount of movement, having that motion blur, I like to just draw it in and have that be a part of the shape. If you look at the prequel trilogy in Star Wars, they actually do this where it's just a white solid, even when it is when you have some motion blur going. Technically, in real life, if you have a bright light source and you move it around, the motion blur, it will start to become more transparent. you can do things that way. Star Wars doesn't, for whatever reason. I kind of like the way it looks, so that's the way I tend to do it. So I will go through all this stuff, and as you are rotoscoping, you like, oops, this one that I was just on before, that's going behind the head here. That isn't a concern here. You just want to get the shape, and then we will mask out the head later. So in order to avoid boring you and all of the not having to go every frame to do that, I'm going to disconnect this polygon by hitting Shift. I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to click here, and I copied a pre-made one and pasted it in, and I'm going to connect that, and let's take a look. So you can see it's going to be easier, I think, for you to see that here. So you can see that this shape is covering the lightsaber. It's going on every frame, even when it's going behind the head. That's fine. We just have the core that is going over everything. And you can see it's not every frame towards the end where there's not too much movement. And then it's almost every frame in the beginning part that has a keyframe in order to get this to move. One thing to note that if you're doing a lot of interpolation or you're relying on motion blur and you want a line, Fusion isn't going to understand that the saber is moving in 3D space. So if it's, tilted away from the camera, the way that it interpolates the frames is probably not usually going to be correct. So that is another reason that I like to do this 4-point polygon. All right, just another couple other speed tips to help you through this process, that some of which I've been doing. But if you are going through a lot of clips, I mentioned frame before and after is left and right brackets. Shift A selects all points. If you want to change your shape size, you can hold down S on the keyboard and click and drag. Oops. That's not what I wanted. I need to select all points first, then hit S, and that will scale from the point you're clicking on. So helps you move your polygon to track your moving shape. You can, with all points selected, hit X and scale along the X axis, or hit select all points, click Y, press the Y button and drag to scale along the Y axis. I already mentioned T, which I use all the time to click and select to twist. Helpful for this. I'm using my scroll middle wheel a lot. If you don't have a 3-button mouse, I highly recommend one. I've got a Logitech MX Master 3. It's got a scroll wheel and extra buttons. I really like it. Highly recommend. And then, especially because I'm hitting Command or Control on Windows to scroll in and out to be detail-oriented as I'm going through all of these things. You can also hit Command or Control and 1 to be at 100% zoom for the resolution of the footage, and hit Command or Control and 2 to be at 200%, so that you can easily shift between those. You can hit Command F to be full screen to fit the footage to your window here. Let's see. All right, so we've got our background, we have our footage. I should mention here that for something like this where there's not a lot of movement, you can use, from where I was, frame 45 and forward, I could use, I could not have done the rotoscoping there, and just from that point forward, done a track, like with a planar tracker to track sort of the edge of the lightsaber and the core here. That may have worked. Usually the reason I choose something is based on time or how many things I want to try. I know that, if I was doing a 2-point system or a lightsaber with not a lot of movement and someone's just holding it and I can see the whole thing, I would probably just place a tracker point at the top and bottom, and that would work. But because I have all this motion blur and all this motion, I crashed Resolve. It can't handle this much power. So that is the reason why I chose that method for this shot. Let's make sure everything's still working as I get back in here. All right. Get my viewer settings back the way I want them. Good. Okay. Now for the fun part, the glow. I've got my saber here, but it's just a white core right now. Sabers glow. That's what makes them look cool. And if already you're looking at this and you're saying, well, it's a lot. It's okay. Fusion cannot be learned in a day. You will get more comfortable with these things over time, but I think you can do it. It's taken me a few years. Don't worry. All right. So Saber Glow. I like to do this a couple different ways. I'm going to zoom out on here and give myself some more room. So this tends to start for me with a blur. This is a bunch of straight lines right here, which doesn't look particularly natural. So I tend to click on my background and start, and I type blur and maybe a Gaussian blur here. And I'm not going to use this for the glow itself. I'm actually just going to bring that way down just so this shape feels a little more natural, just the smallest bit of blur. So it's not a straight line. Then from here, I'm going to add a few glows. And this is the reason why we're working in linear space, so that the glow and a couple different glows are working in the way light works, where a doubling of light equals another stop of light, and it's accurate to how the footage would work naturally. So I'm going to start by clicking on my blur here, and I'm going to hit Shift Space. And let's use a soft glow. There's a bunch of different glows in Fusion. Soft glow I like because it tends to feel kind of natural and there's not too many controls. Some of the other glows have a whole bunch going on over here, and there's really just two things I'm going to use, two sliders, which I like. So I'm going to do that. And I'm not going to adjust any settings just yet, because part of what I want to do here is duplicate this a bunch of times so that I'm getting an exponential set of glows, where the next one is twice as wide and the next one is twice as big as that, and so on. And then I'm going to link them together with an expression so that I can just control one and really get a nice fall off that looks natural to me. So again, I'm going to spread these out so I have some room here. Do another soft glow to that. And let's pin soft glow number 1. Let's go to soft glow number 2. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the gain of soft glow 2, hit equals, and drag it over with the pick whip over here to gain of soft glow number 1. So I want the gain of soft glow number 2 to be this one, the same as the first one, divided by 2. So the second glow is going to be half as bright, and then glow size, hit equals, hit enter. I'm going to grab this pick whip and go to glow size for soft glow number 1. I want this glow size to be the same as glow size, or it's going to reference glow 1 times 2. So it's going to be twice as big. So it's half as bright and twice as big. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this a couple more times. So now I'm just going to hit copy and paste and grab this one, hit shift, put it in there. And then same thing here. I'm going to, this is divided by 4. And now this is times 4. And I'll copy and paste this again. Hitting shift to put it into my flow here. Click that. And this will be divided by 8. And I'll replace that with 8. And you can see, let me open this up a little bit. You can see now if I click on soft glow and I adjust my gain settings here, that I have control over all of these glows, and it's a really nice fall off. And then I can hit the glow size and change that, and it's adjusting all of my other glows. So if I change this glow size to something crazy, go to our final glow, you can see that it's affecting the glow size here. And there we go. So I'm getting a nice exponential fall off here. I'm actually going to add one more. I like to do 5 total of these so that this final one is divided by and times 16. So I've got a really nice fall off, big light source. And now just in this one soft glow node here, I can control how that works. Change the glow size. That's not looking bad. So there we go. Again, I'm going to highlight all of these, move that up, give us more room. All right, so I can affect color in a number of ways. There are some color effects within each glow, but because this is a white core, I can put a grade node after it, and pure white isn't going to be affected by the grade. There's nowhere to go higher than 1, 1, 1 in the RGB model. So I can click on this and hit CC for color corrector. I've added my color corrector node here. Bring that up here. You'll notice as I go, I'm resizing things a lot. I tend to do this because sometimes I need focus on my viewer, and sometimes I want focus on my nodes. So I can just click on the bar here and just drag this up and down. I tend to work a lot opening and closing windows, so that is not a downside of the interface. That's just part of it, where bring something over, move it away, and so on. Okay, color corrector. I'm going to click on that right here. And now this color corrector is going to affect everything that has come before. So I'm going to click on this point, whoop, and I'm going to drag it towards red. I like red. So you can see if I go too far and add too much saturation, my glow goes a little crazy. So I would say keep it light, and we can also affect our glow so that that doesn't happen. But I'm going to drag it towards red. Let's say actually I want, my strength to be here. And now that it looks like that, let's go to the first soft glow, and I can mess with my settings so that it looks more natural to me. And this is going to be different on a per shot basis, how much glow and how much gain you need. But I find that these two controls on the soft glow thing work for me as far as how to do that. It's enough control where I can push and pull to get precise, but without too many controls that I'm overwhelmed with, options. So there's that. So that's pretty cool. And now, because we've already done our roto here, and that's all happening, let's go back to the beginning and play through and see what we've got. Whoa. Not looking too bad. Pretty cool. So glow's looking nice. Motion is looking nice, but you're going to notice that there is some times where, at the beginning here, saber comes in front of the character and then it circles behind, but I can still see the whole thing. I don't want that. I want to create the illusion that the saber is going behind my Sith Lord over here. And the way I'm going to do that is by creating another mask. So we could roto that. We could just do a bunch of shapes around this together. But we've got Magic Mask in DaVinci Resolve. So let's use it. I'm going to hit Shift Space. Does that work? Magic Mask. There we go. Add that. So I'm going to go from the media in. I'm going to pipe this into my Magic Mask. And let's view this. I'm going to click on it and hit 1. So I'm viewing this, just the output of this in my viewer. I don't need to be looking at the Saber output or anything else. One of the advantages of using this node-based system is I can look at, I can in the viewer see any point of the process. So I can be looking at just glow number 3 or 4, or just the color part, or just the output of this mask. And this helps me not try to do everything at once. So I actually don't want to see the glow in here because I want to see what I'm masking. So with the magic mask, this is probably a good frame to be on. I want to make sure it gets the arm and the body and stuff like that. So let's start drawing some lines and see what happens. And that's doing a pretty good job. So I'm just drawing lines to get the shape of the body. Generally here, I'm going to do one more here just for fun. And I'm going to click on, in the magic mask, in the inspector, I have a bunch of options. I'm going to click better. And now I pray to Fusion that it works. And it usually does. But, tracking any number of things could happen. So I'm going to click track forward and then reverse. And let's see how this goes. Tracking forward looks like it's moving nicely. And tracking backward, not so bad. So if I look at my output here, I've got this whole person is covered. It's not getting the core, but that's okay. I don't need the core there. I'm getting the whole arm there. And you can see the saber was picked up in this mask for the beginning of this. That may not be what you want, but for this shot, it doesn't actually matter because I'm only going to use this mask when the lightsaber is going behind the person. So that's totally fine. So let's move this magic mask up here. And what I want to do is connect it to my saber core roto over here. Hang on. Let's find, yeah, so here we go. Here is a frame where we can see that the lightsaber is going behind the person. Click on saber core. Now, there's a number of ways to combine masks. Don't have time to go through all of them, but one of the simplest ways that works just fine is a merge node. You can use channel booleans or matte control or anything like that, but for something where you're just combining two masks, subtracting one from another, essentially, you can just use a merge pretty easily. So I'm going to show you that. So hit merge. I am going to put magic mask into, I think this is the way I wanted to do it. All right, so I'm clicking on merge. I'm viewing that in the viewer. And what I'd like to do is I set this operator to stencil. Whoop. So what that has done is taken the output of this magic mask and said, hey, use that mask to cut out the bits from this mask. And that has done that. So now if I take this, the output of this merge, put that into my background, that is my shape now. Now, if I take a look at my media out, you can see, ta-da, the lightsaber is going behind my person. And there we go. Now, you'll see I have this area where the mask is also cutting out what's in front. So all I need to do is just say, I actually only need this mask when it's going behind my person. So I'm going to start it. Let's see. So I want it to start here. I'm going to go to my merge settings. I can hit the blend and then go to one frame before, and then new keyframe, blend to 0. And then go to the last frame that it's actually being used. New keyframe, next frame, blend set to 0. So now my mask is only being used. Oops. I need to set my viewer to go every frame, not every 2 frames. So let's fix that. Oop. Messed up my keyframes a little bit, but that's okay. So I'm going to go back to this first one and just uncheck that diamond. So I'm not using that keyframe. I want it to start here. It's at 0 on frame 22. It's at 1, frame 23, and I go forward. Let's uncheck that one. And there we go. So it's at 1 here, and then it's at 0 here. And now that mask is being only used during that section. Now if I play through, hey, look at that. We've got a lightsaber, and it's going behind the person, and then in front of the person, and behind the person, and that's pretty cool. Next steps would be to either integrate that, and you can add texture to it, you can add glow, you can add grain, you can do relighting on here, but this is just, scratching the surface of what can be done here, but that is, I think, an intro to Fusion and lightsabers and just a few of the things that can be done in here. I think it's time for Q&A, so may the Fusion be with you.
Oh, man. Okay, so that was really epic, man. I loved that. Yeah, I learned a lot. I love I haven't really used a merge node a lot to combine masks, but that's a great way to do it. I'm always messing with matte control, but definitely going to steal that.
Yeah, it's deceptively simple. Like
Yeah.
there are a bunch of different ways to do just about anything, but sometimes it's like, you know what, if it works and I use merge all the time and it just has one check to make it work, then it works.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was great. That looks really good, man. So
Thank you.
good work. Man, this is so neat. All right, guys. Well, wasn't that great? It was awesome. All right, so we have a few questions here, and let's just jump into it here. Okay, so what do you output to the editor as far as color space, and how does that affect the assets you used?
In this case, I am working in a color managed thing that would then go out to Rec 709 in if I'm a vendor doing VFX for someone else, I wouldn't do that. I think the best workflow is that a VFX artist or a VFX vendor or department will get camera space original, and they will deliver back that same thing. This is, I think, what makes most sense. Especially it helps a colorist. So it's like if they're dealing with footage that's Blackmagic Generation 5, and they get their VFX plates, and those are in ACES or linear or something else entirely, it gives more work to the those other teams. So I think it's just a matter of knowing your color management. So for this, especially if I wasn't working in DaVinci Resolve 19 or not a color managed process, I would just have a media in, do a color space transform to get it into linear, and then a color space transform before my media out to get back into my original camera space.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Is it better to do compositing in VFX before the color grading, or is it better to color grade first?
So there's a couple answers to this, and there's the common After Effects workflow, which tends to be treating VFX as a graphic, which happens towards the end. And there's sort of the narrative TV and film workflow, which is VFX happens before color, which is, the editor will lock a cut. They'll choose which shots are going to VFX. They will then work on those shots and then deliver them back into original camera color space, and then hand those off to color grading, the finishing house, back to editorial, depending on what the project is. I would advise as much as possible to do the latter, only because when a VFX shot is still in camera space, you're you're giving the rest of the team the flexibility to grade it just as if this was done in camera. If you're outputting to a display space, suddenly you've taken out a lot of the dynamic range in the footage, and getting it to match is going to be tricky. If I gave this, like, look at all the different values of light that are happening in this lightsaber. If I did that in display space and then tried a colorist wanted to mess with it, or they were adjusting the look to match and make it look good, they're not going to have a lot of room for that to work without any banding.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, man. Is there a way to get the same composite mode effects from the Fusion page as in the edit page? Do something like linear dodge or divide?
Yes. So a lot of different nodes have them. Merge node, if I click on this merge, you can see I've got apply mode over here, and I've got, all these screen, dissolve, darken, multiply, etc. So you can just scroll down that list. Something actually good for lightsabers, apply mode and lighten. Nothing looks different, but if I had two lightsabers crossing, like if they were, hitting each other, I might actually see a darker spot where one glow is overlapping another. So making sure that the values are continuing to get brighter, because those are two light sources. That's how it would act. So I might want to use lighten instead of normal.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Next, can the nodes be copied and saved for other projects?
Absolutely. Not only other projects, but the same project. So if I had another shot, let's say, I'm working on a movie with a bunch of different shots and I'm making lightsabers, let's say I can hit Command C, copy that, go into my timeline. I've got another shot over here. This is a different shot. Let me make sure that is color managed. And I go into this blank shot. I can click here, paste, and just move that over, add that merge. All that effect is in there. So all I need to do now is, grab a new polygon, put it, that didn't work. There we go.
Yeah, it helps.
And
noises, right?
Yeah, noises help. Hold on. Boop, boop. It's for you, Alex. All right, I'm not going to do a good job on this. It's fine. So I've got that here, but now if I look at the output, bam, I've got my glow.
Dang,
all the settings are there. So all I need to do now is, to make sure the roto is good on this. I don't need to redo the effect. And like you can copy and paste just in there. These are all text based, as we learned earlier. So you could copy that into a text editor. You can grab all of these, right click, save it as a macro. I know Casey's got some videos on that. Macro here, create macro. Alex has some videos on it. So check those out. And you can just create your own saber macro and use that over and over.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, we got time for a couple more here. Does the amount of strokes used for the magic mask affect performance as it does in the color page?
Ooh. Yes, but I'm not looking for performance on this. I'm looking for accuracy. Also, this is a pretty complex shape because hands are coming in and out, that kind of a thing. In VFX, you may work on a shot for an hour or two. You might work on it for a couple of weeks. So if I'm worried about performance, I'm going to take this magic mask and I'm going to, create a saver. Or actually, what I would probably do is do a bitmap and then just make sure that I'm outputting to that. That just makes sure it's just this. And then I can cache that, right click and cache, or I can add a saver node, saver, and just render that out as a mask and then re-import it. So that way I'm not working on any processing power from the magic mask. Every time I'm running this shot, I'm just referencing this black and white mask so that I have good performance as I go. If you are working on something pretty fast and you have a slow computer, then yes, but there are ways around it. It just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, I think if you're working on something that's that you want to look good and that you're going to take some time on, doing things like caching your effects or saving it out, saving out
Yeah.
your mats, and take some time and make them good, and then just do a saver, because then you don't have to make the computer think about it anymore, and you have that nice mat.
Yeah.
It's a lot
The
better
other
than
thing,
making a bad mat.
yes. The other thing to add to that, just as we're going and talking about effects for movies, is like there's one thing with saving time and getting better performance, but as you go and you're making, if you're making your own movie, you want to spend the time that things look great. So saving things out does take extra time, but you're going to do a better job.
Yeah,
There's a lot of want, if you're doing something for a company, they need quick turnaround. That's one thing. But if you're making a movie, you don't want to be fast. You want to be excellent. So getting the best results sometimes
mhm,
requires a more detailed, more thorough, and just more careful workflow. So you can always come back to it the next day, remember what you did, and know things are going to work and going to look the best.
wonderful. Yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, this was really great, and
It
I
was
know
fun.
that if anybody is new to Fusion, I'm sure that was really a great way to see what's possible, and even in just this one simple shot. I mean, there's so many different techniques and cool things that you introduced, stuff with expressions and like making that exponential glow is a really cool way to do that. And yeah, and even the color corrector node to colorize it, I wouldn't have
Yeah,
thought to do it that way. That's a really cool way to do it. So
it
thanks,
is.
man.
It works. Thank you. This was
Awesome.
fun.
Great. Well, hey, everybody, make sure to check out dvresolve.com. If you don't know, Gedaly is in charge of that site, and that's a great place to learn about news about DaVinci Resolve, and it's kind of a hub of Resolve community, and there's courses and all kinds of cool stuff there. If you're into Resolve, definitely check out dvresolve.com. And Gedaly was kind enough to sponsor ResolveCon, which is really amazing. And so
Because
make sure to go
ResolveCon's
check him out.
awesome.
What was that?
Because ResolveCon's awesome.
Oh, yeah. So no, sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you say it a little loud? No, I'm just kidding. I legit didn't hear you the first time. Okay.
ResolveCon is
I
awesome.
said it's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's give Gedaly a hand. Yay. Thanks,
Well,
man.
thank you. Thanks everyone for watching.